So for the poll, we're interested in knowing what is your experience with transdisciplinary education. So how experienced are you with transdisciplinary education? We have three options: little to none, average, or experienced. And we already see
there are some
many
responses.
Votes coming in.
And this is also for us to understand. I mean, it's quite a broad audience, so this is also for us to understand how much in depth we can go in some topics. And in the end of the presentation, we do reserve some time for questions. So feel free to keep some of your questions for the end, or put them in the chat. Okay. Well, I think there's some difference, but there's an average.
Quite experienced audience.
Yeah.
Or at least there's experience in the room.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, where are we here? So we will start our presentation with first of all setting the tone on actually what is transdisciplinary education, so we all can have a common understanding of what we're going to be discussing. And
nou op mijn oortjes.
I think someone has to mute themselves. Sorry, it's fine for us, but maybe, yeah, let's go back. So transdisciplinary education actually makes sure that a wicked problem or a topic that is interesting and relevant for multiple actors actually will be collectively and collaboratively tackled, identified, and analyzed. So this demands, of course, interaction and collaboration between and across disciplines with external and either academic or non-academic actors. And Anke will explain a bit more on the differences actually between the different, inter, trans, multidisciplinary education.
Yes, indeed. So we noticed that actually when we talk about transdisciplinary collaboration, sometimes it's used interchangeably almost with multi or interdisciplinarity. But for us, it's also important to distinguish what are differences. And what's mainly important is that, as we can see on the image here, with disciplinary or multidisciplinary, there is less of a focus on integrating the knowledge from these different fields. So where multidisciplinary distinguishes itself from disciplinary is that there is a common goal set and everyone works on the one thematic umbrella, but there's not such a focus on the integration of knowledge from different scientific domains. Then if we move to the next, then looking at the differences between interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, where in interdisciplinarity, researchers from different academic disciplines meet and work towards integration. Within transdisciplinarity, there's also knowledge co-creation between different domains. So also, as Dimitra said before, external actors or those outside of the academic realm are part of the knowledge creation. And although the image is maybe slightly confusing because the goal here is set within the academic knowledge field, I would say it should be rather in the middle. So there's also a co-creation or a co-definition of the goal between the academic and non-academic actors involved in a project.
Yeah. So we're going to move into the why. Already Ines explained our approach actually and our thinking in terms of AU education towards why transdisciplinary education. I'm just gonna quickly say a few words on this and maybe expand it. So of course transdisciplinary education and research, because I mean of course Kuku is also focusing on the research part and we as well, they respond to wicked challenges, right? So these situations are basically very difficult to grasp in terms of complexity, and they need to take into account the diversity of life, world, scientific perceptions, and they usually link to abstract cases. So what happens is that we kind of need to change how our societies create knowledge or approach recreation maybe of knowledge when it comes to these wicked problems, and recognize that in many areas universities or academic knowledge doesn't have the monopoly. So we need to open up into the maybe other perspectives, other experiences and insights, and combine this academic, non-academic knowledge. And this, of course, emphasizes that universities, as I think Ines highlighted before, can function as change makers and catalyzers, let's say, of change and creating a sustainable future. So they can act as the main bodies of preparing, supporting and assisting in creating this change, combined with all these multiple perspectives in civil society. And this necessity of acquiring knowledge in a transdisciplinary manner is actually also highlighted in the UNESCO report of 2021, where also 4 main pillars are suggested as the main learning elements, which are to learn to do, learn to know, learn to live together, and learn to be. So these are sort of like pillars that are related to transdisciplinary education, and they are concluding, in order to achieve them, actually concluding that the transdisciplinary vision ensures that an integral education of the human being. It actually transdisciplinary education can ensure that.
And then as we're talking about the need for transdisciplinary learning in relation to these wicked problems, we also find it important to stress, as has been written by my colleague Corinne Lamen in collaboration with TNO, that the intention here is not to solve the problem. So that sounds always very tempting, that through transdisciplinary research or education, we're going to solve problems. But in this paper, they highlight that it's more of a ripple effect that we're trying to create. So instead of solving the problem, introducing incentives into the system that will positively support or partly initiate and accelerate transitions. So we're talking about transitions, and also, as Ines just mentioned, there's a transformative element to it. So the example they give here, it's like throwing stones, releasing fish, or even placing dams in a river, knowing that the subsequent ripples and blockages will influence the movement and direction of the water, creating new streams, alternate flows, or completely new river routes. So a very instrumental approach to transdisciplinary learning is not in place. We'd rather like to stress that it's part of initiating and accelerating transitions.
Yeah. And we're going to move into the how, because we also want to share with you how we are trying at least to approach transdisciplinary education and reach this level of education. Yeah, so we have already been collaborating quite closely on rather quite some initiatives, actually, on understanding and reaching transdisciplinary education and research.
Yeah, and we realized when we started to collaborate that in our approaches to transdisciplinary learning, we as initiatives both focus on the need for participants to be able to cross these disciplinary boundaries and to be facilitated in terms of tools and methods of working together. And therefore we find it important to put into place support processes, but also tools for these interactions to take place. And there's a specific focus also on the kinds of competences we need in these types of collaboration.
Yeah, and if we are comparing, let's say, the competencies that we come across most often in our work, but also in literature and research, some of the competencies that we identify as very critical ones or very important ones are critical thinking, system thinking, collaboration, communication, reflection, creativity. Of course, there's the disciplinary grounding and perspective taking, finding common ground, and then the integration. And these competencies are, of course, we are able to actually achieve them using design methods or approaches, tools and resources, of course, you already mentioned. And the design methods that we are using are actually functioning as the pedagogical conditions to foster these competencies. Mainly in the trainings and education programs that we have, we're using learner-centered designs. One of the approaches that we have been using is challenge-based learning quite extensively in the last years. Maybe now it's also time to share more about what we do with specifically the transdisciplinary education team in EWUU, because we're focusing on education for students, for professionals, and of course we have research, educational research taking place. And we're supporting a lot on the consults on course design, participating actually on developing and designing activities and programs, and connecting existing initiatives and collaboration, supporting actually collaborations across our universities and outside of our universities. When it comes to education for students, even though we're seeing it in a bigger picture, right? Because of course we're talking about transdisciplinary education. But when it comes to curriculum design, we do have at the moment at least 6 courses that are co-created among our institutes, and they are trying to approach and reach the transdisciplinary elements. So you can always find these courses also as examples and find more about the course design elements in our website. But basically, in all of these courses, what we're trying to do is use wicked problems that we explained at the beginning, and have students work together closely on them with academics, so within all 4 of our institutes, but also with society partners. When it comes to education for professionals, we are mainly focusing at the moment, or we have been focusing on actually creating opportunities for professionals to further develop themselves on lifelong learning skills, but also on courses that, for example, have to do with preventive health related topics. And we are also at the phase of developing a learning community, so a bigger learning space for professionals together with academics and society to work on a specific area or topic.
So at the Center for Unusual Collaborations, we focus on grants, but also training and support for inter and transdisciplinary collaborations, and our focus group are mid-career academics. What is most important, I think, for today to share is that we offer training in mostly interdisciplinary competences, I should say. We can go to the next, and that focuses on the 4 competences that Dimitra also mentioned previously, part of a framework developed by the UU. So those 4 competences for interdisciplinarity are disciplinary grounding, which relates to becoming aware of your own disciplinary biases and assumptions. Then perspective taking, so also learning to appreciate differences across disciplinary perspectives and adopting a mindset or attitude also of disciplinary humility. Then it's about finding common ground, becoming aware of the tensions, the commonalities, but also the differences in perspectives. And then finally, integration. So how can you integrate perspectives or integrate knowledge in these different, when you co-create. As I just said, the focus for us still is on interdisciplinarity, although we see currently teams that we are supporting moving into transdisciplinary collaborations. And that also makes us aware of the need to actually develop training for transdisciplinary collaboration. So also within KUKO, we're moving more towards enabling and facilitating transdisciplinary collaborations. And relevant in this regard is that we're working on a hackathon on transdisciplinary collaborations together with TNO, and that's also a collaboration between KUKO and EWUU Education. There's different things happening at the ITD conference in November in Utrecht. So a workshop for change makers on fostering IDG for sustainable education by the Education Group. And then there's a workshop on transdisciplinary collaborations offered by KUKO in collaboration with Pathways to Sustainability, one of the strategic themes of Utrecht University. And another one on integration, so knowledge integration in unusual collaborations, a topic that we will also delve into more at the next Lunch and Learn. Then I think it's important to mention that together with Pathways to Sustainability, we're developing a modular transdisciplinary training for researchers. And we also offer different forms of training at the teaching and learning days at the respective institutes.
Yeah, especially for the colleagues that are part of EWUU institutes, I think it's good to know that we're always present in giving workshops during these days. So please just be aware and keep an eye when these are happening for us. Just to, I think we need to wrap up actually.
Yeah.
There are going to be two colleagues actually from the research team presenting right after us. So I don't want to take too much time on this, but it's good to know that within the education group of EWUU, of course, as I said, we're also focusing on educational research. We have mainly four areas that the research is actually at the moment focusing on, which is adaptive expertise and lifelong development, challenge-based learning and teaching, technology support for adaptive expertise and collaboration with social partners. Some of these topics will be discussed in terms of outcomes, and you can always keep an eye on our newsletter, because I think always there we will be posting articles and research data that will be published. Just to finish, we have two more slides. We will share the slides with you. We have a list of open access resources that are quite relevant in terms of transdisciplinary education and research. I'm not going to go through each one of them separately due to time, but there are a lot of toolkits with resources on how to design or activities that you can actually use in your own education or even in your professional life with colleagues. And a list of reports, papers, and blogs relevant as these are actually outputs from our teams. And finally, you have a call for the Spark grants.
Yeah, I think it's just nice to mention also, assuming that there's researchers listening in today, that there's an opportunity to also join the Spark grant and the Spark Phase 1, which is the training, again in spring. So you can find more information on the KUKO website. And then a final slide, I think, is that there will be another Lunch and Learn on October 17th. And if you're specifically interested in the topic of knowledge integration, I very much invite you to join. We will be hosting it as KUKO together with Annemarie Hoorn, a researcher at UU, and Sylvia Brugman, who was part of one of the KUKO projects, which ended last year, and she will be sharing experiences from her project. And I think, I don't know if we have time.
Wait, I will just check the chat.
I think you have 1 minute because actually you're in time.
Yeah.
I can see one question. The question is, what does success look like, and is there a framework to measure this? That's the question.
And that's a question that was posted in the chat?
Yep. Yeah, probably. Success in terms of, if that person could maybe just, success in terms of what?
Well, he's not knowing exactly what they mean. Maybe I can speak of the top of my mind, and then I don't know if I'm also speaking for education. But within KUKO, we always look from the side of topic, team, process. So that's what we call our unusual triad. So you could look at success in terms of topic. So what has been achieved in terms of insight or knowledge created related to the content, to the wicked problem. But also in team, what have people been learning from each other? How have they experienced collaborating across? How have they developed as human beings, as researchers, or in whatever capacity and role they're participating? And also in terms of process. So what have they learned in terms of competences? To what extent have they been able to integrate knowledge? So I would say you could look at success at least on these 3 levels. And I'm sure Dimitra has more to say about it.
Yeah, and I don't know, for me, the question just triggers, the fact that at the moment that we are with this type of education, we do want to give a lot of space for personal elements. So we always start, at least with the students, but also the professionals, by checking what is their goal. The personal profile of someone, and what how they would like to define their own maybe personal success. And through education, and of course through all of the experiences that they have within education, they can reach that. Of course, with coaching support and all of these maybe development pillars that we were talking about. But I think it's a very broad question. I'm not sure if we're answering it for this person, but please feel free to send us any more questions, or you also have our contact details, and I know that Erika is gonna share the slides later with you, so you can always reach out. And we're also very happy if you can reach out with maybe suggestions, resources that you have that you think are relevant to the topic that we're working on, and maybe possible collaborations that you would like to initiate. We're happy for that.
Yeah. And we're happy to get back to questions from the chat later, but now I think it's also time to make space for Yvette and Cassandra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Can I directly take over? Is that okay? Yeah, here it is. I think you can now see the slides of Cassandra and myself. So thanks a lot, Dimitra and Anke, also for introducing the research team on EWUU education. So now Cassandra and I have actually the opportunity to discuss more specifically the challenges that we organize as EWUU for students. So these are challenges in which students from all 4 different institutions participate in mixed teams. And the research that we conduct on the impact of such education, because of course it's really nice that we have these innovative forms of innovative education, but as a research team we would like to find out, okay, what does it actually do or mean for the learning of our students? Yeah, and here is our CBL research team. You can see Cassandra and myself, and we work together with Despina from Utrecht University, Helene from the Medical Center of Utrecht University, and Antoine from Eindhoven University. And Cassandra is also here, so please could you introduce yourself shortly, Cassandra?
Yeah.
Thanks, Yvette. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassandra, and I'm a skills trainer. And the slides just changed by itself. Skills trainer and also a PhD candidate at Wageningen University. And as Yvette mentioned, I'm also involved in the education research team at the Alliance.
Thanks, Cassandra. And my name is Yvette Baggen, also working at Wageningen University as an assistant professor on the topic of entrepreneurial learning and other forms of innovative learning, such as CBL. So let's go into our topic and the focus of our presentation. It was already nicely introduced by Anke and Dimitra, but yeah, CBL, what do we actually talk about if we talk about challenge-based learning? I would say, to keep it simple, that transdisciplinary learning is kind of part of CBL. So in CBL, students learn across disciplinary and also sectoral boundaries. So they learn from students and other stakeholders with different disciplinary knowledge, but also from people from outside of the university. So also said by Dimitra, we would like to prepare our students as kind of change makers, those who are able to address societal challenges, which we call here on the slide grand societal challenges, and they are characterized by uncertainty, value-ladenness, and complexities. And CBL offers a way to integrate these kind of characteristics in education, and then also a way to prepare students for such a demanding role. So the students in challenge-based learning are challenged to work together in a mixed teams. So students from different disciplinary backgrounds, but also students from the different 4 institutions from the Alliance, by working together with real commissioners and all kinds of stakeholders from within and outside of the university. So to make it concrete, we have on the next slide, yes, 4 concrete examples of challenges that were organized by the EWUU. And one of them is the Dutch Dairy Student Challenge. It's the second one on the slides, where students worked on a challenge faced by the dairy industry, and they had to come up with solutions for dairy farms to continue to exist in the future in a healthy, sustainable, and economically feasible way for the farmers, the environment, and also, of course, for the animals. So you can see that these are real topics. It's a societal challenge. And the students also, during working on those challenges, are, well, first of all, supported by different coaches from the university, but they also really have to work together with the farmers, with other people that are affected by this challenge. So it's real, and they really face and experience what it's like to have to solve or address all these, well, these uncertain and complex challenges in education. And as part of our research project, we've done 2 studies so far. The first was done by Gemma, who has left the team because he's currently working at the Utrecht University's Copernicus Institute for Sustainable Development. But she had the lead in this study, which is already finished. I will tell you shortly about it, and then Cassandra will take over from me and tell you more about the second study. Because in this first study, we were first of all, because of this transdisciplinary nature of the challenges, interested in the question like, okay, who is actually involved in challenge-based learning? And from who do the students really learn in working on a challenge? So the key results, to focus on that for now, is that we could see is that many different stakeholders are involved, and students mainly reach out to teammates and experts for content-related knowledge. So I think that's also really interesting to see in those challenges. It's really about the way of learning, the how, but you can see that the students also really need the expertise and really the knowledge to be able to address the challenges. And what we also saw is that they don't only reach out to people that are listed in the course guide, but actually also to family and friends, especially with emotional struggles. For instance, if they have problems with teammates or with working with perhaps a bit stubborn farmer to say something, they actually go to their family and friends. So also these people have a role in student learning. Well, and from there, we took the initiative for the second study, Cassandra.
Yes, thank you, Yvette. So in the previous study that Yvette mentioned, we got to get a glimpse into the students' network and also what they got out of their contact with the various people. And the results actually also hinted a little bit about what students actually learn from various people. And because of that, that actually made me curious to find out, what exactly do students learn from challenges? And that kind of gave rise to the second study, which I will tell you a little bit more in the next few slides. But the research question that we had for this second study was to explore what are students' perceived learning gains while participating in challenge-based learning, and also which learning experiences actually impacted those learning gains. Before I go into the methodology and the preliminary results, I just wanted to briefly mention the Learning Gains Framework. So this Learning Gains Framework has actually been introduced by Vermunt et al. So I think Jan Vermunt is actually a colleague in Eindhoven. And in this Learning Gains Framework, they actually conceptualize learning gains into 4 components, namely the cognitive, metacognitive, affective, and also social communicative. The cognitive component actually refers to knowledge and understanding. The metacognitive refers to how one thinks about their own learning. So for example, how do they plan, monitor, and also assess their own learning strategies? And then affective component actually relates to one's feelings and attitudes. So for example, motivation and also emotions that arise while learning. And finally, the social communicative actually refers to the ability to communicate and also to work with others. So this learning gains framework actually kind of provided like a basis for us to analyze the results, which I will talk about in a minute. To conduct this research study, we adopted an explorative and qualitative research design, and data was actually collected via semi-structured interviews with students. I actually managed to speak to 19 students that took part in the challenges that happened in 2023. And these students were actually from all the 4 institutions of the Alliance. And as for the analysis, we made use of the abductive thematic analysis, which includes both inductive and also deductive ways of looking at data. So what that means is I looked at the data to see what kind of codes and themes came out of it, but I also had some codes that I derived from the Learning Gains framework, which I shared in the earlier slide. Okay, and just moving on to the results. Based on what we have analyzed so far, this is actually the distribution of the learning gains across the 4 components. So the learning gains related to the social communicative and the cognitive were amongst those that were more commonly mentioned. And in the social communicative part, we have subcategories such as engagement with others, as well as perspective taking. And then for the cognitive part, we have content and procedural knowledge, as well as reasoning abilities. While the affective and also the metacognitive aspects were not often mentioned, they were actually still being mentioned. So I think that's also good to know. And under the affective, we have subcategories such as motivation and inspiration, as well as emotional struggles. And metacognitive, we have things like self-regulation. As for the learning experiences, this is actually what I have thus far. So this is actually a screenshot from the Atlas TI program where I have my different codes. So these categories or codes were actually derived from the data inductively, meaning how I actually derived this was I read the interviews and then I kind of made notes and also codes based on what kind of learning experiences I thought came out from the data. And there are actually a variety of the learning experiences being mentioned by the students. For example, interaction with coaches, course academics, and also stakeholders. And students also mention, learning via observation of others, but also through an overall reflection of the experience. And students also, of course, learn when they are searching for information on the topics that they were working on. The learning experience that were most commonly mentioned or linked to the learning gains that they told me about were working in teams, interaction with stakeholders, as well as working on challenge outputs. I would say this is not really surprising results, but this is also kind of in a way confirming that challenge-based learning is kind of working because working in teams and interacting with stakeholders and also working on challenge outputs are kind of the biggest parts of challenge-based learning. And I think from this study, we actually added 2 new subcategories to the social communicative component. And one of it is actually perspective taking, and the other being interdisciplinary learning. So this quote here on this slide actually shows an example of perspective taking, which is also what Anka mentioned earlier in her slide. So in this example, we define perspective taking as learning from different perspectives, different ways of working or doing from various practices. And this student, C6, actually mentioned that they learn by seeing how the different types of people, and also seeing the value of having different people in the team. So in this learning experience that C6 shared with me, they were actually working on a poster, and the student mentioned that because they had an engineering student within the team, that engineering student was very into the details, and from that, this student C6 actually saw a different perspective because of the other student. Yeah, so this actually shows how this student was actually taking the perspective of the other student. And below here, you see these orange boxes. So this actually shows the learning experiences that were linked to this learning gain, which in this case is working in teams and also working on the challenge outputs. The next example is interdisciplinary learning, which is related to learning about the various disciplines that their teammates have been trained in. So for this example, this student C3 actually talks about the different disciplinary backgrounds that is present in the team, and also how they have different points of view and different ways of approaching a problem. So in this student's example, they mentioned that from working in teams, they realized that a student from a medical background actually prioritizes treatment before prevention, and for a student that was from a nutrition background, actually focused more on prevention rather than treating. So that was also an example to show how the students actually learn from the different disciplines within their own teams. And one more quote that I'd like to share with you is this on self-regulation, which is under the meta-cognitive component. So I think with CBL, it's a kind of a student-centered approach, and students really have to kind of take charge of their own learning. So I think this quote really shows nicely, how students kind of self-regulate their own learning. That because that in the challenge, there was not really a teacher telling them what to do. The students really had to learn how to work independently and be able to plan their own schedule to get the job done. Okay. Yeah, so to kind of run off this presentation, I'd just like to share with you some conclusions as well, and also some takeaways that perhaps might be useful for practitioners or people who are interested to conduct challenge-based learning. First of all, challenge-based learning, really provides plenty of opportunities. And challenge-based learning is actually also increasingly being adopted in education, especially in the Netherlands. And perhaps you can already see from this study, students can actually learn a lot and also really benefit from this type of education. So hopefully this is maybe a call to action for some of you that are maybe still deciding whether or not to organize challenge-based learning. I think, even though it has plenty of challenges, no pun intended, but it really brings about a lot of different learning opportunities for students, but also for academic staff and also the external stakeholders that are involved. And the next one is that, I think also from the examples of the quotes that I shared, it's actually a good way for students to learn about perspective taking and also interdisciplinary learning, which is something that might not necessarily occur in students, everyday study programs. And I think the Alliance, the challenges organized by the Alliance is also a good platform to allow students to actually work with others from different institutions so that, they kind of get out of their own bubble and also learn from others outside their own study and the institutions. And thirdly, just wanted to share also some suggestions. So in my interviews with students, it actually came up quite often that some students actually do not feel very confident or comfortable enough to actually approach stakeholders. And they cited that, perhaps having a training session on networking or maybe just giving them some tips can actually also go a long way to, instilling in them some confidence to actually approach external stakeholders. And also some students actually also mentioned wanting to learn how to work on a prototype. So going beyond, just proposing a solution. But of course, they also know that, it's a very short time to actually work on the challenge. So yeah, I think they're also aware of it, but I just wanted to share it with you as well. And finally, the part about affective and metacognitive. So from the results, you saw that a lot of times it's the social communicative and the cognitive parts are mentioned, more commonly mentioned, and the metacognitive parts and the affective parts is perhaps not as frequently mentioned. But I think it perhaps got to do with, it's maybe a little bit hard to articulate as well. But I think it's equally important to also kind of, focus some efforts on that, because that's also a way to help students to learn from this experience. And maybe an easy way could also be to, include more reflection moments with students that are perhaps not attached to a grade. I think from this, how I came to this was when I spoke to students, a lot of them actually, mentioned that they really appreciated having the conversation with me. So not only me getting the data I want, but also for them, it was a chance for them to, verbalize what they've learned, but also kind of reflect on their experiences that they went through in the challenges. And looking at the time, I think I will not go through all these further research points that we put down, but feel free to take a look at the slides later on when you receive them. But yeah, I hope that, from this presentation and also the earlier presentation of Dimitra and Anke, you get to know a little bit more about challenge-based learning and also transdisciplinary learning. And hopefully that also encourages you to want to organize challenge-based learning for the students. Thank you. I don't know if we have some time for questions. I see it's 1 o'clock.
Maybe we just have to conclude. I already see people leaving. So if somebody still has questions, still feel free to hang around. We will address your questions in the chat. And especially we want to say a big thank you for your attendance, and let us know if you have any further questions about what we do in relation to transdisciplinary education as Alliance, or transdisciplinary learning, I would say. And also, of course, more specifically, the research we conduct on student learning and beyond in the challenges of the Alliance. So thanks a lot, and would love to stay in touch. And then I think we wait, I would say, was it Teun? If you feel free to ask your question. Feel free to leave or to stay here and ask your question out loud.
Hi.
Bye, Ines.
Thanks for the presentations. I'm with the UMCU and I teach a course on physiology, so how the heart and the kidney and the lungs, etc. interact. And I do similar teaching in Eindhoven. So I had this idea, it would be nice to bring these two groups of students together because they have to learn more or less the same thing. But I'm not so sure whether the challenge approach would work. So do you have experience in bringing together like really large groups? So it's about, I think, 100 students on one side and about 170 on the other. So is there like support for that? Something, can we get support to organize this? Because it's quite tricky with different schedules, etc.
Maybe I can come into that. So I think it's nice if we can have a talk on this because we do provide some support in terms of like facilitating this kind of collaborations, especially when there are existing links between the universities, and when it comes to student numbers or finding the moments in the academic year that actually fits the different courses to work on parallel or something like that. We do have a team that can think along with you. It really depends because now, of course, we are not going into detail, right? So I think it's better if you contact me, and then we can think based on, like the exact situation. I have some further questions towards you, but we can discuss it.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thanks. Maybe now
we have two more people with a question.
Yeah, Calliope.
You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to do that. So basically, it's not clear to me. Okay, well, we know the advantages, etc., and it's interesting, etc. But how is it organized in practice? So is it part of the of the normal curriculum? Is it part of a course? Is it organized as an extra sort of a club activity? How do you contact other colleagues in other universities? Or, I mean, in practice, it's not clear to me how is this implemented.
Okay. Yeah, so we have, I also put it in the chat, but it's also on the slides. We have, because we had more of these questions, a platform where you can get sort of like a step-to-step guide on how to do it. It is, just to answer briefly your question, it is implemented already in, our different institutes within EWUU in a course level. Without a collaboration, and we as a team are helping creating the collaborations or facilitating some of the collaborations across the universities. You can do it in curriculum level, so it can be an elective course or it can be a compulsory course, and we do have examples of hackathons, which I think goes to what you were saying about extracurricular. We don't really prefer that because ideally you have a longitudinal process that students will go through and follow in order to, actually reach some of these competencies that we talked about before. I would suggest, due to time, to also maybe contact me, Calliope. It depends also on what you want to do. If there's an existing idea that you have or existing colleague in the other universities that you have a link to. And we also, maybe it's good to say that we do support with some for the development of new courses if there's not an existing collaboration, but we do aim to have it embedded, fully embedded, if there's an initiative within existing education. So, and that's something that we also look into together with the teacher that wants to be involved.
Yeah, the other thing that I can perhaps foresee is that currently courses are scheduled around this block structure, and such an initiative, perhaps this kind of pace of a block is not enough for this kind of education. You need a more part-time and more long-term thing rather than intensively for this. I don't know, is it 11 weeks kind of thing? So this also requires some change in the duration.
No, not necessarily. We have courses. We have examples of courses that could start, like from 2 weeks long to 2 semester long, to 30 CTS, for example. So it really differs. And depending on what your learning outcomes are, it really follows, like a constructive alignment kind of, we start with learning outcomes and then also like what's the duration. And then depending on that, we do the design and we see the elements that you can incorporate.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. And maybe one last question. And of course, whoever wants to leave, please do so. Sorry, I cannot see the name. Is it Han?
Yeah, can I ask a question? Oh,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe for both the presentation. So I wonder, do you often formulate the learning goals for the stakeholders, so non-academic partners, and do you, or maybe how you can monitor the co-creation or co-learning between student and stakeholders, because usually the student learning are more emphasized and the other way around, I think it's often missed, like how stakeholders learn and what do we also make impact on the stakeholders when they join this form of education, and what kinds of learning goals that we can set for stakeholders. That's my question.
I think Yvette has more, she's more related to this topic, so I'll give it to
Yeah, thank you, Dimitra. It's an interesting question because at this moment, challenges are still mainly developed from the perspective of the university and student learning. So we often have learning objectives for the students, And what we also have, it's a little bit different, is the mixed classroom, but that's not being organized yet, as far as I know, on the alliance level, but at the institution level, in which the professionals also get credits, and then often they also have to pay for participation. And then there are, of course, learning objectives for the professionals too. And we are in an explorative phase of doing research on the learning potential of CBL for professionals. And we also created a tool, but unfortunately it's until now only in Dutch. But we also created a tool that can help higher education institutions together with businesses or other organizations to create CBL programs in which there is also specific and explicit attention for the learning of the professional. So feel free to reach out if you want to learn more about it, because we are starting this kind of research. We are actually doing it. And we also created with AI a English version of the report that we created for NRO, that was the subsidy provider. Yeah, but it's an interesting question because the stakeholders are so much involved that we also want to know what do they learn from it and how can we frame it to the stakeholders as a learning opportunity. Yeah,
like engaging them more also in this.
yeah,
form of
indeed.
learning. Yes.
Yeah, then you really get the students and professionals as co-learners and co-creators of knowledge, and that's what we would like. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great to hear. Keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I think we need to wrap up. Thank you all for also very, very nice questions and for being
Perhaps
here.
Piet as a final one.
Yeah.
See in our
Yeah,
hands.
sorry, it just came up this
It's
question.
okay.
So I very nice presentations. It reminded me of something I put in the chat. This was this minor that started up in Medical Delta, where students are working together with societal partners and so on to solve specific health problems, even in a neighborhood.
Oh, nice.
So I was thinking, how does this relate? And is this like a unique initiative, or is this more? For me, it was very enlightening because I think for the next generation of scientists, this is a good way to start getting used to this type of projects.
Yeah, this from there is actually one similar. I mean, there's also another kind of like I don't think it's a minor, but it is a big course in UMC where students, well, actually BIT is one where students collaborate also with patients within the UMC. And there's also, I think also for the bachelors, a similar initiative with pharmacy and UMC working together. So there are initiatives also internally in our universities. It's just about, like maybe finding them. I think more and more people are basically realizing that it's an important way to work. Also for the academics. So I think it's also coming a lot from teacher initiative to bring this type of education to their students, but also from their own. Maybe it's related to the professional also development of their own that they want to do this.
Yeah. Well, nice.
But
nice
thank
to
you
hear.
for sharing it because I will check it. I mean, it's always welcomed if you want to share more things that you think are relevant. Please do. I mean, we're still in a phase of exploring as well some things. So
yeah, I
nice
think it's
work.
really interesting. Yeah, I think
For me,
there's
it was
actually
just very inspiring. If you want to change the world and the way things work, start as young as possible. So this was a nice initiative, starting with a minor already.
Yeah, indeed. Fully agree. I think you can see more and more challenge-based learning, and maybe many teachers and researchers are actually doing it without knowing that it's being CBL. So I'm also happy that we're getting more research in this direction to learn what actually works and what does not in such learning programs. Yeah.
Should we ask for a stop of the recording and really give the final thank you? I think at least I would have to leave. But thank you, everyone. Gabriela, could you maybe stop the recording?